All right, we got the full summary for 1134, and we are seeing what most people believe to be is Shanks's brother showing up to Elbaf. Like, he's arriving there the same way that the Gorosei arrived at Egghead. And he's actually not coming with a Gorosei, he's coming with a woman. Exciting stuff, and we'll get to it, but of course we gotta go over the full chapter first, so let's do it. The chapter starts where the last one ended. Luffy officially thanks Saul for helping Robin while extending his hand to greet Saul. He says, "Saul-san, I understand that one of my underling has been under your care. You have my appreciation. Allow me to introduce myself." Luffy is using the Yakuza's way of speaking, so everyone is amused because they have no idea where Luffy learned those words. Lol. Sanji says, "Where did you even learn that from?" Luffy says, "Please gave us." Robin, interrupting Luffy, says, "This is Luffy." Lilith introduces herself to Saul as Vegapunk. She and Bonnie travel too with the Straw Hat crew and Gerd in the Sval. Then Lilith asks Jinbei to take out from the Sval one of the machine boxes she brought from Egghead. Gerd helps Jinbei taking it out. The box is a sealed capsule with a Vega sticker attached to it. Jinbei says, "We carried it out of the Egghead base on Vegapunk's instructions. What's inside?" Lilith says, "It's me." Luffy in shock says, "Vegapunk's clone?" Lilith says, "That's right. Unlike us Satellite, this is a complete replicate. This Vegapunk was the one who visited Elbaf 20 years ago. The government would naturally start to have suspicions if Stella just up and left his labo for several months, right? We have managed to get it out by putting it in the nutrient medium, but we lack the machinery to bring it out of the box safely." Lilith says that she's going to stay in Elbaf and build a new laboratory to revive Vegapunk with his clone body and also to cure Kuma. Bonnie is very excited to hear that. Okay, that's pretty big, but also kind of like underwhelming. I'm sure many of you know I'm not too big on Vegapunk like the Stella one, but if this isn't like a facsimile of the Vegapunk that we came to know on Egghead and it's just like the brown mustached one, then maybe he's different, but it just feels unnecessary to do this. Because we already have Lilith, and then we have that other Franken satellite who pulled itself together back on Egghead. So why do we need this old Vegapunk? But it just almost seems like a retcon to explain why Vegapunk was at Elbaf 20 years ago. I mean, if he finally explains some stuff of substance, then yeah, I'm all for it. But if it's just gonna be more of the same from Egghead, it's just like, what, why? But I do like the possibility of curing Kuma. Yes, it kind of makes his sacrifice pointless, but this is One Piece, and a lot of things that people do ultimately don't have consequences. But first, given my demo, I'm sure there's a lot of aspiring programmers out there. Well, you're in luck because today's sponsor, Boot.dev, can help you with that. With Boot.dev, you can learn back-end web development from start to finish in the Python and Go programming languages. Because the smartest way to learn code is to make sure you're never bored so that you can, actually stick with it long enough to reach your goals. Because you can't learn to code without actually writing a lot of code and building real projects. With Boot.dev, you'll earn XP, levels, achievements, and complete quests to get a top spot on the global leaderboard. There are bi-monthly boss fights where the community rallies together and gains bonus XP for each lesson completed during the event. And all the content is free to read and watch in guest mode. A paid membership unlocks all the interactive features like hands-on coding, AI assistance, progress tracking, and game elements. So guys, go to boot.dev and use my code Zhoniin to get 25% off your entire first year if you choose the annual plan. Thanks, guys. The Giants will give the Straw Hat crew a school tour, while Robin, Saul, Chopper, Lilith, and Bonnie go up to the Owl Library. We see the outside of the school building that looks familiar to the Owl Library. Straw Hat crew meets some giant kids playing near Warrior Spring before going to school tour. Usopp asks them if they also intend on sailing one day to live adventures and fight some ruffians, but someone answers Usopp that this is not the trend anymore. Zoro says, that came from an adult just now. Usopp says, what do you mean by that? The giant kids say, you better get out of the way or just wait to be scolded. You're right on top of Ripley sensei. We discover that during the conversation with the giant kids, Luffy and Usopp have been standing on top of Ripley's body that is lying on the floor. Luffy is on top of Ripley's chest, like when he met Shirahoshi. Ripley is a beautiful woman with a lion tattoo in her face, and she is the biology teacher in Walrus Academy. Usopp says, "We were stepping on a giant? Sorry." Ripley says, don't worry about it. Not like it's heavy, like the heavies that I have. That aside, you are surprised, right? Elbaf warriors wreaking havoc across the world. That's 100 years ago. This is not the era of violence or plundering or war anymore. Ripley explains that giant kids in Walrus Academy are more polite and peaceful compared to other kids in Elbaf because the school follows the will of late King Harold. King Harold wanted Elbaf to become a peaceful nation that do trades and negotiations instead of war. That's why he didn't get along well with the elders of Elbaf villages. After King Harold was killed by his own son, Elbaf has no king. Ripley says that she's from the last generation of warriors, so she would have loved to see Luffy's white form. According to Elbaf mythology, there was once a warrior who looked like that. Robin, Chopper, Lilith, Bonnie, and Saul arrived to the Owl Library. Just before entering, Saul explains to Robin what happened with Ohara's books and how he managed to get them back. "When I arrived to Elbaf after what happened in Ohara, I just couldn't get my mind off of the records that the scholars gave their life for. So I asked Hirudin and his gang for help, and we returned to Ohara once more. When I saw those tiny books intact, I couldn't help but cry. Now then, let's get inside. And Robin, you better be careful with that book you have in your hands." Robin says, "Oh?" Chopper says, "What?" Suddenly, when they enter in the Owl Library, the book Robin was holding in her hands turns into giant size. The book is now bigger than Robin. We finally see Owl Library in a beautiful double page. It is a mysterious library full of giant books. Around the giant bookcases, there are a lot of massive tree branches hanging around them. And on one of the branches, we can see the giant owl sleeping. Saul says, "How's that? Are you surprised? These are the books from back then in Ohara, and now in giant size. This is the mysterious Owl Library, where the books grow large upon entering. These are all the records that Ohara protected 22 years ago. We kept our eyes open while searching, so we could bring back every single one of them. Every last one." Robin remembers the words that Clover said to her in the Tree of Knowledge when she was 2 years old, and then she cries with happiness. Clover in the past says, "This is the world's best library. You like books?" Saul says, "I'm so glad the day I could show you this all has finally come." Cut to the underworld. Loki is talking to someone named Mosa. Mosa talks in a very polite way and seems to be a timid person. We don't know yet if Mosa is a man or a woman. Loki and Mosa haven't actually met, but they have talked for a long time using Denden Mushi since Loki has a lot of time and is bored. Over time, Loki has come to consider Mosa as a friend and calls him/her Mosako, a name that indicates Loki respects Mosa. Loki says, "Are you still traumatized by the horrifying experience you talked to me about, Mosa?" Mosa says, "Yeah, I'm still shaken by it." Loki says, "If I had been there, I would have killed all of them for you, Mosa." Mosa says he/she is beginning to notice that while Loki may use scary words, he's actually kind-hearted. This makes Loki angry, lol. Alright, so this might be building up Loki as somewhat of an anti-villain, maybe not completely full-blown despicable curly mustache bad guy like what we typically get. He might have some depth to him and maybe ultimately will wind up an ally of the Straw Hats at the end of the arc. Well, I guess ultimately most characters are going to be the allies of them once the secrets of the world government are exposed. It's not like they're going to be like, "Yeah, let me join Emu and all the psychos in the world government." At the end of the chapter, we cut back to the western village of Elbaf, the village where the Straw Hat crew arrived in the last chapter. Dory, Broggy, and the other giants are drinking while they wait for the Straw Hat crew to return. Broggy says, "Hey, the party hasn't started yet. We're killing time through drinking." The giants say, "Well, you're drinking too much." Suddenly, a black lightning strikes in the village's castle. In the absolutely epic final double page of the chapter, we see that a magic circle has appeared in the throne room inside the castle. The magic circle is the same we saw in Egghead when the Gorosei appeared on the island. But this circle has no number. Remember, that Saturn circle had the number 5 on it. From the magic circle, 2 people with black cloaks appear kneeling on the ground. The first one is the hooded Shanks, who was talking to the Gorosei during the last reverie, which happened in chapter 907. The second one looks like a woman with bandages covering her mouth and her hair covering her right eye. The editor's message says, "We have invaders." End of chapter. Here we go. Things are really exciting now. So, like I said, the popular opinion on this guy is that he is Shanks' brother. And as Zhoniin said here, this is very likely the same person we saw in chapter 907. Now, I went in depth on this, or kind of in depth on this in my previous spoiler video, but I'll plug it in right here. And also, I am going to make another video on this chapter once we get the panels of what these guys look like, and I'll go more in depth in it at that point. So hopefully that video will be out Thursday or Friday, so look out for that. Then when Dragon was talking to the other revolutionary commander and he mentions the Holy Knights, which is I think the very first time that they are ever mentioned in the series, we see silhouettes of them, and the one in the middle, who is like I guess the new leader since Garling is now a Gorosei, looked like Shanks. Well, you know, his silhouette did at least. And then we were thinking, oh, Shanks has a brother in the Holy Knights. But it was kind of loose. You know, we were only going off of the silhouette and the sword shape, which, you know, resembles Griffin. Shanks' sword. Garling's sword also kind of resembles Griffin in a way. But then later on, when we got that big awesome collage panel at the end of chapter 1121, showing us who the final players in the hunt for the One Piece are, we saw this silhouetted person again, which seems to be the same silhouetted person from the Holy Knights that we saw in 1121 with the same sword. And since we saw this, we're like, oh, he looks even more like Shanks now, kind of, I guess, maybe. So now we go back to the spoiler, where Scotch Informer says one of them is like Shanks, same as chapter 907. Now, 907 is the big infamous chapter where we thought it was Shanks meeting with the Gorosei, talking about a quote-unquote certain pirate, but now it seems like that wasn't Shanks this whole time. It was his brother. And it's like, wait, why? Well, it's because we don't see the left side of his face. And on the left side of Shanks' face is this iconic scar that he received from Blackbeard in a fight that we have yet to see. This could have been Oda's 4D chess move of introducing Shanks' brother this whole time. And if that is the case, I will bow down once again to Oda. What an incredible twist. I mean, I think it would have been better if Shanks was evil this whole time, but I'll take this too. This is great as well. Also, if that is the case, then it makes sense how the Gorosei were treating Shanks' brother in this sequence. They're like, hey, you know, what are you doing here? Given your standing, you have nothing to do with politics. So if they're talking about him being a Holy Knight member, then that totally makes sense. Also, before we go further, one more thing that is pointed out here by Pewpiece is from an SBS, or I don't know what this is from, some kind of Q&A Oda did. Probably from an SBS, maybe from some kind of magazine or something, I don't know. But he was asked, you might have been asked this thousands of times already, not sure, but is Shanks 2 different persons? You know, since Shanks is sometimes drawn without his scar. Plus, he arrived at the Power Mount War so quickly with unbelievable speed, despite having just fought Kaido. And then Oda apparently said something censored. He didn't answer. And then the text on screen says, please take your own conclusions from this. Ooh, spooky. And finally, if this is Shanks' brother and Garling, or I don't know, somebody else, maybe another Holy Knight with him, it doesn't have to be a Gorosei, but it just makes sense that it would be due to the magical circle, then it goes back to what Dragon said when we were first introduced to the Holy Knights, and that's, if they mobilize the Holy Knights, that's where the fighting will begin, meaning Elbaf is the beginning of the end. Things are really exciting now. I cannot wait to talk more about the possibility of this being Shanks' brother and why it all makes sense and why he's probably going to be an ultra mega powerhouse. But yeah, guys, that's pretty much it for this one. Let me know what you thought about this in the comments as usual. And if you liked it, please give it a like and please subscribe if you haven't already. Have a great day and I'll see you in the next one.